Welcome to Let's Chew the Gum. I'm your host, Protocol. We're talking about a lot of things in this show while we chew the gum. And as always, on each and every show, we always have
something for your mind, something for your mind, something for your mind,
정신을 집어넣으세요. 어떤 건 필요합니까?
something for your
정신을 집어넣으세요.
mind,
정신을 집어넣으세요.
something for your
Welcome back to this latest edition of Let's Chew the Gum. I'm your host, Protocol. Let's Chew the Gum is the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z while we chew the gum. Some folks say, how can you chew gum and talk? And I like to remind them that I like to chew gum and talk. It gives me focus, it gives me a nice rhythm, and so why not? Let's chew the gum. You can reach this podcast where you're listening now and also on multiple platforms, multiple podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, Spreaker, Podbean, YouTube. Just search up Let's Chew the Gum for podcasting, and also on Spotify. If you want to be a guest on the show or want a topic heard on the show, feel free to email that information to letschewthegum@gmail.com. Today is June 19th, and it's a very important day in the United States and hopefully recognized around the world. Today is Juneteenth, which is a representation of freedom for African Americans in the United States. And today I'm glad to welcome my two guests that I'm going to introduce in a minute, because we're going to talk not only about the importance of freedom, but the realities of what freedom can bring you and having a free mind. My first guest is none other than Derrius Quarles, and many of you may have heard of Derrius. Derrius was born and bred on the south side of Chicago. Derrius marched through 13 years of foster care after losing his father to violence and being separated from his mother to become a first-generation cum laude graduate. Entrepreneur, web designer, keynote speaker, and author. He is unapologetic about using technology and business to improve Black lives. His first book, $1 Million Scholar, Winning the Scholarship Race, has assisted thousands of students across the globe increase their knowledge of how to make higher education more affordable through scholarships and grants. And his business ventures have collectively impacted the lives of over 15,000 marginalized youth in America. He is co-founder of BREAUX Capital, a fintech company that is helping the 70% of Black millennials, starting with Black men, who would not be able to afford a $1,000 financial emergency, enhance their financial health through a powerful combination of software that automates savings behavior and education through a peer community. A driving force behind Derrius' inspiration is a humbling honor he received from Harry Belafonte at the Common Ground Gala, hosted by musician and actor Common in 2012. Mr. Belafonte said to the audience that Derrius is the dream Dr. King and I, as well as so many others, fought for. Derrius now carries the torch that will touch many lives along his journey. In 2015, he was honored by Barack Obama at the White House for his activism in expanding educational access, and his work has been highlighted by the Associated Press, Black Enterprise, Huffington Post, CNN, MTV, Time Magazine, and BET, amongst others. It's an honor to welcome Derrius Quarles. Derrius, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dr. Kwanda. I greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, we're very glad to have you here. And before we go on, let me introduce your well-spoken and very insightful partner. My next guest in the studio that will be joining us today is Asan. Asan is co-founder and co-CEO of BREAUX Capital. Let me welcome you both to the show.
Peace, Dr. Kawana. Thank you for having both of us. Certainly appreciate the opportunity to chew the gum along with you.
Absolutely, man. I think this is I'm
on
sorry.
this
Go ahead.
amazing day.
Say that one more
I said
time.
particularly on this amazing day.
Right, absolutely. I was just going to say this is a timely. We've been talking over, could be over a month or so now, about getting together to have this conversation, or just focusing on the benefits of BREAUX Capital and the positive things that both of you are doing. So it is fitting that, through all the manipulating of dates and times and coordination, that we were able to come together for this date to, be able to offer our audience this great information, and also highlight the great story that we've introduced on Derrius so far. So I just want to open it up, Derrius. When folks, that haven't had a chance to hear your story, or have just only now heard the bio, what is it that, has given you the drive to overcome the situations that you experienced, starting with, early on in life? What was that drive like?
The very first thing that I would have to point out is all of the black elders who came into my life at a very critical juncture and poured into my cup and encouraged me to find inspiration and motivation within myself. That is really the thing that I would connect the dots on to really inspire youth that are coming up behind me. I try to encourage them to understand that their mothers won't be around forever, that their uncles won't be around forever. The people who are most likely consistently in their ear, giving them that motivation, giving them that nudge that they need to, sort of expand their mind, think larger. That those people will one day transition, and they may not be around them as much to sort of light that fire for them. And when those people are no longer around them, who will they point to? Who will be their sources of inspiration? And the reason I try to encourage them to do that is because that's really, at this point in my life, been the largest source of my motivation. Is it comes from within. The work that I've done to really just nurture my own character, nurture my own spirituality, my own understanding of my place in the world. That's the thing that motivates me today. But it wasn't the thing that I always had. Did not always have that self-esteem, did not always have that confidence. So much of my childhood had been centered around really being broken down, really being discouraged, confidence being, you know, sort of seeped away from me anytime I tried to show it, anytime I tried to speak out, sort of being beaten down and marginalized. And it was it was really a collection of early mentors who, were not my family members, by the way, which is important to note. These were, you know, community citizens, people in the larger village who had the audacity to take me to the side and say, I'm going to treat you as if you are my family, and I'm going to treat you as if you are my son, and I'm going to pour into your cup. And that's physical resources, right? The tangible resources that a 14-year-old boy, 15, 16-year-old boy is in need of at that time, particularly if he's going through foster care. And that it's also those non-tangible resources as well. The building up of faith, the the, the knowledge-based resources that I was pointed to during that time, that just really helped fortify me and put me on this pathway to say, okay, I'm in the driver's seat now. Once I turned 18 and I emancipated out of foster care, I was in that driver's seat, and I was in position to say, I've experienced so much trauma up until this point in my life, but I can no longer hold on to that. Like, I'm no longer there anymore. Like, that trauma is actually behind me. And what do I want to do with my life moving forward? Like, what do I want my life to look like moving forward? And so my dad, my non-biological father, drove me down to Morehouse College August 19th, 2009. He dropped me off. And from that day forward, I really had made the decision to say, I'm going to mold my own life. I'm going to set my own path. and I'm going to prove a whole lot of people wrong in the process of doing that. And I could say, of course, with now being a decade removed from that, in hindsight, I can say that I certainly forged that path and achieved that.
Yeah, that's outstanding, man. And you brought up some really great points. The idea of encouraging youth to sometimes be their own support system, their own self-regulators, because nothing is guaranteed. And it just took me right back to myself growing up in Detroit and then South Central LA, both as a teenager. And at that time, I tell folks that it wasn't uncommon that you weren't going to see certain classmates next week or certain neighbors next week because they were going to be dead, mostly to some type of violence or some type of trauma. And so the pillars that you set up or the foundations that you're trying to make are sometimes continually taken from beneath you. And how do you get back up? And people have asked me the same thing. How did you overcome that? And I sometimes, like you, I said, there were a few people here and there, or sometimes I had the wherewithal to think about, some person that may not even been in my life at that time, but how would they look at me based upon the decisions I make, and let me get motivated, because at that time it was just a motivation to do it for them. Because at times, like you said, continually being broken down and traumatized and things like that, it made it difficult to get up and try again and to believe in that this is possible. And so when I hear stories like yours, or if I use myself as examples when I'm teaching others that are going to work with young people, I let them know that every life is valuable, and you should not give up on those individuals who are struggling and those that don't look like you, because they may turn out to be a Derrius Quarles, they may turn out to be a Asan, they may turn out to be a Dr. Kawanda, right? Someone that has a valuable experience and a story to share, that can share a pathway, and that is a positive contributing factor. So I appreciate you sharing that story. I'm going to say elucidating that for people, because a lot of people don't think that deeply about it. So that's definitely important. Mr. Asan, is there something that you would like to add on to that?
No, I just, I'm always fascinated by Derrius' story, because it is really just a magnificent display of willpower, self-determination, and really just, holding on to that vision and not letting that flame flicker. So, bro pretty much hit it right on the head, man. I too have a similar story of men in my community who weren't necessarily my blood family, but who became uncles and grandfathers,
Right.
And even fathers in the community that really poured into me and really saw something that was different, or pointed me in the right direction and put me on a path. I would not have even gone to Morehouse College if it was not for my calculus teacher in high school, black man who's pretty much, become one of my fathers at this point. And then, of course, attending Morehouse College, becoming a sociology major, studying sociology, all of those things, right? All of the dots connect in retrospect. And, that's how we're here today, was because, some black men decided to, point me in a direction, decided to challenge me.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to say now, we're not only is it Juneteenth, but we're 2 days away from Father's Day. And I just want to dispel dispel the rumor and re-encourage the narrative that black fathers are present. And it's sometimes your own father, sometimes it's a extension, it's a community father, it's somebody, right? So as men, we are fathers to lots of people, fathers to the fatherless, and those things matter. And same with me, just a few people here and there that may have said something. And so I'm glad that the audience is getting a chance to hear this, because, in light of the recent events in the country, and I say recent events, I'm going to say the recent highlighted events in the country, because the violence that's been experienced upon the black body, as my man would say, is nothing new. And as I think Will Smith said earlier in the decade, it's only now that a lot of racism is being reported and seen. So this is nothing new. But in light of that, this conversation in particular today is important, and I'm glad that I have you guys both here to talk about that. I want to continue to ask you guys for encouraging words, because and we're going to definitely get to the most important part of this conversation, which is BREAUX Capital. When I began teaching, I was hard on my students because of my experience and what I had gone through. In high school, I had been homeless, and I had to navigate the streets of South Central LA. And you're plotting and planning to get to school and get home without being shot, right? So I'm thinking militarily about which bus to catch, which route to take, when to go and when not to go, how late to stay because this gang is fighting that gang, or someone was shot yesterday, or the police always harass me on this street, right? Those are things that a teenager's contemplating just to go to school and come home, right? We haven't even talked about homework or social life or meals or anything like that. Just military planning in a sense, and that on top of being homeless. So when I'm teaching, when I saw students not doing so well, I was pretty hard on them, saying, you know what? If I did that through Detroit and South Central LA in the mid '80s and survived that, you can definitely do it. So I was a no excuse kind of person. And then one day someone sat me down and said, well, what if they can't do that? What if they don't? So again, the idea is, how do we transform the message for others who may be struggling, that can hear those stories but don't know how to pick up the pieces? And that may not be a question that we have today, but I want people to understand that we understand not everyone has that resolve. And so as a community, we need to continue to build up our young people to be able to instill in them that resolve. Is there anything aside from our stories, Derrius or Ross, that we could add to encourage young people to sort of stick to the plan and the mission to survive and to excel?
I'll take the first stab at that in saying something that I didn't pay as much attention to when I was young, that I've come to understand is so significant, is the people who you have holding you accountable that you spend the most time with. Who are your peers? In high school, they used to explain it as, you're going to become just like your 5 best friends. So, whoever you hang around, just know that you got to be real careful about who you hanging around. Da, 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 da. And as I think about how my brain received that message back then, it was the type of thing where it went in one ear and out the other, not because of the content of the message, but because of the delivery of the message, right? It didn't stick because I don't think it was delivered in the way that truly tried to help me as a youth connect the dots between what was being said, because the statement is very true. The people who you have around you who are willing to hold you accountable for certain things, who are willing to check you when it comes to certain things, keep you on task to certain things, that's just as important as that resolve that you have within yourself, because it really puts you in position to not just have to be dependent upon your own tenacity to get through things. You have resources around you supporting you, that if you get off track, they're going to let you know that you're off track. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to do the work for you. They're not, most likely. They're not going to do the work for you. But what they are going to do is let you know what work you need to do more of, or what work you need to do less of, when you need to take a break, when you're getting off track, when, you're not as focused as I saw you a couple months ago, or, last time we checked in. Those things are so significant. And in adulthood, that's the thing that I've come to find continues to give me joy, continues to keep me creating new goals, right? Anytime I feel like, okay, well, I've reached this point 5 years ago, this was my dream, this was my vision. Like, where do I go from here now? It's the people around me who continue to motivate me to say, well, if you got to where you were dreaming of 5 years ago, think about what you could do in 10 years from now, right? What's the next thing that you're looking to go to? So much of it comes from within, but so much of it is then sustained by the outer, the external, those around you. And that message just wasn't received to me as a youth because of how it was delivered by so many of the elders around me, even though I think the content of that message rings very true.
Excellent response. I couldn't have said it better myself, man. That was excellent. That was excellent. Um, I'm really glad that again you guys are here to join me. We have two Morehouse men in the house, and shout out to Morehouse, man. As a youth, I wanted to attend that school as well. I didn't get a chance to, but definitely understand the legacy there and all the great things that are being done from the university and individuals like yourselves who are products of that university system and that fraternity. So I appreciate that and the insight you guys are bringing forth. You're listening to Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z. We are talking today with Derrius Quarles and Asan, co-founders of BREAUX Capital. And we're going to get into a conversation in a moment about the ability for individuals to uplift themselves and to invest in themselves and in their future through entities such as BREAUX Capital, which is a very positive structure that these two co-founders have put together. We'll come right back and have after a word from our sponsors. Stay tuned.
Something for your mind, mind.
Please mind gap.
Something for your mind.
This episode is sponsored by Instagrad 2020. Instagrad 2020 is a celebration of 2020 graduates of all ages from kindergarten through college and any other program where there would have been a traditional stage crossing, but it didn't happen because of COVID-19. We're celebrating graduates all year long. Follow Instagrad 2020 on Instagram at Instagrad 2020 or on Facebook. Also, be sure to visit the website www.instagrad2020.net for more information. There's merchandise, contests, scholarships, so much fun where we're honoring people all around the world. So if you know of graduates or if you want to support graduates, be sure to check it out. All right. Thank you for listening to our sponsors, Instagrad 2020. We're back with none other than Derrius Quarles and Asan, co-founders and co-CEOs of BREAUX Capital. This has been a great conversation on overcoming and triumphing through dilemmas and triumphing through disappointments and disasters within our lives and just being empowered. We want to continue this conversation on this very special day. It is June 19th, 2020. So this is Juneteenth, a celebration of emancipation, of the freedom of African slaves. And just real quick, for a lot of people still ask me to this day in my classes, what is Juneteenth? And I'll just briefly say it was the day when slaves who had been still toiling in slavery finally were receiving the information that they had been free for almost 2 years. So Juneteenth, a day to symbolizing breaking the chains, and now it's a recognized event, and we're hoping for a national holiday. And also, we're 2 days away from Father's Day. So this conversation today, again, is so appropriate to talk about because we're talking about the emancipation and the upliftment of people. We're talking about the importance of fatherhood. We're talking about now transitioning to the importance of financial freedom and independence. So it all ties together. So let me invite you guys back in on the conversation to talk about how institutions such as yours or companies such as yours, BREAUX Capital, can be beneficial and an influence to help, solidify our communities and provide that security and financial independence that so many are seeking. And either one of you.
Want to take that, bro?
Yeah, there you go.
You got it, Ross.
So, BREAUX Capital is based upon a model of financial wellness. And we knew that we had to develop a model of financial wellness because there is on one end of the spectrum, a bunch of conversations around financial literacy, a bunch of initiatives for financial literacy. And then on the total other end of the spectrum, we have financial independence, which is where, people are ultimately trying to get to. And so it's literacy to independence where is the middle ground, right? No, just knowing about, uh, how to manage money or how to manage your finances and how to make strategic decisions regarding your resources and capital is much different than actually, experiencing that lifestyle. So what is the middle point? The middle is financial wellness. And so we've developed four components of financial wellness in conjunction with the National Science Foundation and our research at the University of Pennsylvania. So there are four components. The very first component is being able to take care of your basic needs, right? Food, clothing, shelter, right? Okay, you can do that. Good. Are you able to handle $1,000 emergency? Right? That's the second component. The third component is, are you able to take advantage of financial opportunities as they present themselves, or AKA invest, right? And that, of course, requires some knowledge and some due diligence, as well as having some cash on hand. That fourth component, which Derrius mentioned earlier and alluded to in his explanation around, or rather his words of wisdom on success, is that the people that you have around you, your two closest acquaintances, and their ability to handle $1,000 emergency, take care of their basic needs, as well as invest at will. If those two people that are around you are able to do that, and you're the third person that comes along and is able to do that, then we can say, okay, you are financially well. And that puts you in a great position to go ahead and achieve financial independence, right? And so, Bro Capital, our model, our company's model, our business model is based upon three of those four components, and really all four of those components. So the very first thing, being able to take care of your basic needs, right? If you're gainfully employed, or we'll touch on this later on, gainfully employed, right? We are helping our members achieve a cash reserve in just 1 year or less, a cash reserve of that $1,000. Then we are also providing education and resources around business development and investing for our members. And then, of course, we are a transparent organization to where all of our members are able to contact one another and interact with one another all across the world, all across the country. Uh, and that is where our innovation lies in terms of, you know, the banking or the financial services industry. We are not a bank. We are not financial managers. We are not financial advisors, right? But we are able, as our name states, Bro Capital, able to aggregate all forms of capital, not just financial capital or human capital, but all forms of capital of our members in order to achieve, right? In order to better help them serve their families and their communities.
Absolutely. Darius, I would ask that you also chime in on that also, so that as many viewpoints as we can get on this, or as much input as we can get on this to our viewers or our listeners. What is the importance of something like Bro Capital for individuals, especially in current times where finances are uncertain, businesses are closing, people are being laid off, and people are striving to just try to figure out their daily operations? How can Bro Capital and being associated with this organization be some relief or some assistance to those folks?
Well, one of the first things my mind goes to is the fact that the United States of Black people is one of the wealthiest nations in the world. We are, trillionaires in terms of our buying power, in terms of our spending power. But that doesn't necessarily translate over to the assets that we have, the wealth that we have accumulated, that we built up, that we can pass down intergenerationally. And, that's something that Ross and I have known for over a decade now and been aware of. But in terms of it sort of translating over to impacting our lives directly, it was in 2004, really the phase of 2014 through 2015, that sort of brought it right in front of our faces and helped us understand that, wow, this is intergenerational. The economic trauma that we've experienced as Black people, it really it holds us back today because we have a whole bevy of young people out there with extreme talent, right? Crazy innovative ideas about how to, better various systems, various institutions, right? They've got the idea. They may even have the team pulled together that could potentially pull this concept off. But the very next thing after that, after you work through, okay, what are you going to do? Who you're going to do it with? Then you have to think about, okay, what are the resources I need to accumulate in order to make this happen? Within the realm of entrepreneurship, the very first thing that people turn to is you got to raise money, right? It's time to accumulate some dollars so that you can go out there and start up this innovative concept that you're sitting on. And that's what happened to us. We were entrepreneurs straight out of Morehouse College, graduated in 2013, went out into the world, and the very first thing we did proudly is employ ourselves. We turned down jobs in corporate America. We said we not about to go just straight back to graduate school and just do more school. We have a great idea that we're sitting on that can help the Black community, that can help economically marginalized people. We want to see ourselves go out into the world and make this thing successful. Because if this idea is successful, then we're going to impact a lot of lives in the process. And that was our first company that we founded together, $1 Million Scholar, which still exists today. And as was stated in my bio, has helped over 25,000 youth across the globe in really accumulating resources in order to make their higher education more financially accessible and not have to utilize loans in order to gain a higher education, which is extremely relevant to the Black community. And in that experience of sitting on this great business venture, right? And this is a business venture that was generating revenue. It had great traction. We had customers. We had a lot of different things going for ourselves. We found it extremely difficult to raise money for this thing in the midst of being close to, peers who are non-Black, who were raising hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars for things that were not even close to what we were achieving, right? And we were finding it difficult just to get a couple $1,000s from people. And so when we went across the world pitching this venture, what we found is that we were consistently going into rooms that were either all white men or majority white men. And we kept, no matter how grand our pitch was, no matter how sharp we were, no matter how sharp our presentation was, no matter how sharp our suits were, no matter how sharp our language was, no matter how sharp the haircut was, no matter how sharp the calculated figures were. Like every time we went back to the drawing board and said, what can we do sharper to make, not just pitch it better, right? Because pitching is one thing, but actually make the business more viable, more investment ready. We constantly did that. Literally over years, we iterated and kept getting the same no. And then we came to realize that it's something more going on here. It's a bigger conspiracy. It's not, okay, Black companies aren't getting invested in because they're not investment ready, right? They don't have the right leaders, or they don't have the right business model. They don't have the right knowledge. Not enough Black entrepreneurs in the pipeline. That's false. That's not real, because I can humbly say that we were at the top of the game. We were ready. We were sharp. And
we pitched Damon Johns. We pitched Damon John. Walked away with a check.
Yeah, and won $25,000. Interestingly enough, and when it came,
and there was a particular entrepreneur who, we won't say any names, but they definitely let us know that these the reason that we aren't getting invested in is because they're always looking for a reason not to invest, and we have the 3 strikes against us. First strike, we're Black. Second strike, we were young, fresh out of college. And then, of course, the third strike was this was our very first venture coming out the gate. So venture capital is not traditional venture capital, wasn't checking for our venture for a number of reasons.
And Roz, I'll ping off of that and say beyond that, what we also found, and this is more of a hindsight thing, is the reality of the type of black men that we were walking into these spaces was
Very
really
true.
I would say the most major issue, even bigger than just being black. It what I've come to realize in this entrepreneurship thing, that it's not so much about them having a great disdain for blackness in general, because that is one thing, but in reality it's a particular disdain for a certain disposition of blackness. It's a certain expression of blackness. The people who are pro-black, white folks really hate that. They really hate the black people who are for black people. They love tokenizing us. They love the black man who will walk into the space with a white wife, and they will certainly elevate that black, right? They love the black man with the bald head, no facial hair, white tone in
Speak on
every
it.
word that he says, right?
Speak on it.
They will elevate that black man within those spaces, and almost, I say, treat him as one of their own. He's one of the brothers. And it's like, for us, that was not us, in a variety of different ways. That just wasn't us. And we also didn't have any intention to try to change or manipulate ourselves for, some, economic gain. And so we came out the gate saying, we're gonna be real black. We're gonna be unapologetically black. And of course that translated into a lot of doors being shut in our face. And so that was the day that we realized that, wow, all of the black entrepreneurs out here who are sitting on transformative ideas to impact the black community, they are the ones who are at most risk to not be funded. It's not the black entrepreneurs who are willing to sell out their culture. It's not the black entrepreneurs who are willing to be culture vultures who are going to get the door shut in their face. It's really the entrepreneurs who are trying to hold on to their black, who are trying to really benefit the black community. And they're not approaching it from this all lives matter perspective. They're approaching it from a black people are specifically suffering. So we're going to create a product or a solution or some sort of business model to try to address that in some different way. And there are hundreds of problems that can be addressed through business models within our community. And so we very quickly realized that, wow, we need to go to our own people if we're going to get the capital for these transformative business ideas. And, of course, the first thing we were introduced to was, why don't you just go to your friends and family? What about friends? You call it F and F. And, 2015, this was a foreign concept to it. We like, F and F, what? Who, what? Friends and family? Going to my friends and family for what? You want me to ask
Right.
them for how much money?
Right, for 250K.
Exactly. And it highlighted a lot of systemic issues. Of course, it was an individual experience, but it was an individual experience that opened up our sociological eyes and showed us, oh, this is what we were studying at Morehouse on the ground when we were talking about economic analysis, right? We're talking about macroeconomics. This is how this connects. And as we continue to study that issue further, we knew that we couldn't continue our entrepreneurial journey without building something that could begin addressing that head on. And really that evening, we decided in 2015, I think, Ross, what month was that in 2015?
Man, that's a great question. I want to say it may have been March, late March, because
Okay,
I want to
was gonna
say
April.
I was about to say by early April, I know we had the brunch. So it may have been March, and then we had, put some time on the calendar, sat down and really mapped it out. And yeah, man, and by the time 2016 rolls around, it was live and available to the world.
That's outstanding, man. And I'm glad you guys had the wherewithal and the tenacity to stick to it, because I definitely understand the experience that you're both expressing. And oftentimes, as you said, Derrius, even growing up, it's similar to the disappointments and the letdowns that individuals have to overcome to continue to believe in themselves and to persevere through, the obstacles that may come in their way, to, be determined to see their dream come to fruition, or whatever it may be, a dream or a goal or a mission. And so I'm giving big ups to you guys for being able to not only see that through a sociological lens, but through a personal, dedicated, perspective of, these are the realities that we're facing, and then you use transformative ideas and motivation to overcome that. So I would say a big up to that. And so as we're talking about this topic, people are often skeptical when we talk about financial investing and where they're going to put their money, and they want security, and oftentimes you'll see they're going to straight back to some of the big wigs that are in the first place not supporting our communities. They're going to the investment firms that are not necessarily reflective of our particular values, but have shown some type of track record, oftentimes tracking all the way back to slavery. And those investments started with slave investments, and through the talents and the tenacity of folks that look like us, but the benefits haven't been bestowed upon our community. The credits haven't been bestowed upon our community. So how do we change that narrative and that mindset that investing in something like BREAUX Capital, investing in Black business, is valuable, it's sensible, and it's the right thing to do? How do we change that narrative to get those folks to really come home, and the friends and families that we don't have? How do we do that?
It's I was about to say, I'm gonna take the first stab at it, like you say, and hopefully this is something to build on. I know a lot of people talk about the first law of nature is the law of self-preservation, but I want to acknowledge that humans have the benefit of consciousness. So the first law for us is really self-knowledge, and it's really going back to knowing who we are, and knowing ourselves, who we are. All right, where you both of you all talked about the inner environment as well as the outer environment, and truly understanding and coming back to the fact that we are original people and what our place in the world is, and of course the issues that have beset us. So I'll really just say, as simple as it sounds, right? Of course, it's not easy, and I know it's been said before, but it truly all boils down to, we have to know and understand ourselves to, of course, then love ourselves and to see ourselves working with one another cooperatively as our norm.
Okay. How about you, Derrius?
Such an important question, Dr. Kawanda, around so I'm paraphrasing the question a little bit to sort of the light bulb that really popped off in my mind around how do Black people come to trust themselves more, right? When they hear and see Black business owners, Black innovators coming with solutions to solve potential problems, how can we approach that from a level of wanting to do due diligence on that thing, of course, because it's not about blind trust, but at the same time, it's also something to where we can be critical of ourselves, of the very first thing that we assume when we hear about these solutions is some sort of scamming, some sort of scheming, some sort of taking, somebody trying to take an opportunity to take advantage of you in some way, shape, or form. We've been done so wrong and so unjustly over these centuries that we've really come to distrust ourselves more than anyone else. Right? More than we distrust a Wells Fargo, more than we distrust a JP Morgan, even though we know their track record. Right? We know the history that they have, yet and still we won't question them with the level of scrutiny that we will the bootstrapping Black entrepreneur who's trying to start up something new and fresh that can potentially benefit the community. And so I do take issue with it. I do my best to challenge people anytime I see that, and whether it's a social media post, whether it's a private conversation, whether it's a public forum, I challenge anyone who attempts to discount the the veracity of Black business, the validity of it, right? Anybody who tries to take a knock at us in the community of Black business owners, because the reality is that so many of us are trying to offer what I would describe as like a Rolls Royce experience with a Chrysler 300 budget. And in a lot of ways, we really are doing our best. In a lot of ways, we really are innovating just off of the strength that you have to innovate when you don't have the same access to resources. When you don't have the same access to just spin your way to success, you have to rethink the model. That's the only way to win, is actually you have to play the game differently. You can't play by the same game that the Wells Fargos of the world are playing with, because the reality is that you don't have access to the same resources and capital that Wells Fargo does. And so that's one of the things that BREAUX Capital represents. And I think it sort of serves as a shining light of what can happen when Black people do start trusting one another. And I'll take it a step further and say it's an example of what can happen when Black men start trusting one another. Because what we've found over these years of building BREAUX Capital is Black men in particular are skeptical of other Black men. It's almost as if we know that, like, or assume that, like, look, I know the type of man that I am. I know I be out here scamming, so how can I trust that this man ain't out here scamming? And so it's a fascinating thing that, the day I guess we start challenging ourselves to be better and to elevate at the individual level is the day that we might begin trusting each other more and connecting with each other more along that line, because we know, well, if I'm a stand up man, it's got to be other stand up Black men out here, right? Can I not find a way to connect with those other stand up Black men and do something that's collective versus it just being well, I'm working on my own thing over here, so that's all I'm interested in is what I got going on. And those would be some of the bullet points that I would start with around how we can collectively address that issue around trust. And then I will close it out by saying one of the ways that BREAUX Capital has innovatively solved that is by transparency being one of our core values of the company. I think the white business world is predicated upon this idea of secrecy. It's predicated upon this philosophy of, you don't have to know everything in order to be confident in what's going on, right? That's really how it works. When you deposit your money at, these white owned and operated institutions, do you know what they go do with it in the background? Do you know how many loans that they issue with it? Do you know how many mortgages that they have, connected to the depository account that you have with them? You don't know all of that that's happening in the background. In fact, it's quite an untransparent process when you really dig through it. So why don't we scrutinize them to the same level that we scrutinize ourselves, that we scrutinize Black business owners? That's a question for the world to truly answer. I find it fascinating. I don't know why, but the reality is we don't question the philosophy of secrecy and the philosophy of sort of what happens in the shadows is like, well, they have expertise, they have degrees, they have connections, whatever this thing is that convinces us that they know what they're doing, so I don't have to ask any questions. I don't know what that is, because the reality is we don't give our same people that benefit of the doubt. So to address that, BREAUX Capital off top says we believe that Afrocentric business, like Black business, is business that's transparent. That's the first thing that we have to offer each other is, in order to build trust, we have to operate in a very transparent manner. which means what our standard for that means that, no questions are off the table. That doesn't necessarily mean that we expect you to be hands on and, trying to dig too deeply into everything. It's just saying that if you need to know something, there's all questions are open, type of policies. That's first and foremost. And then many of the processes of the business and how the money is flowing, all of that is transparent. So, for every member who's involved in BREAUX Capital, they can actually see what other members are doing, how money is flowing in and out of the organization. And that makes us just a very different organization today. You really don't see that level of radical transparency. And so I think that's another way that we address that from our organizational standpoint. And it's a way that I believe that other organizations who might face that same problem around trust, how do you engender trust? Think about how to make your processes more transparent. How do you turn what generally has been private, how do you start to turn some of those things more public?
Outstanding, outstanding. I'd say this for our listeners that are there and that are now considering investing in themselves via BREAUX Capital. Take us through a short process of what that might look like once they go in front of their computer or whatever device they're using to access it. Take us through a short step, because we're coming up on an hour, of what they experience in that interface between the computer and aligning themselves into the world of BREAUX Capital. In other words, I'm asking, how simple is the process and how can they get started?
So the process is fairly simple to get started. Of course, we are an organization, private membership organization, specifically targeting Black men in particular, right? So that's the first thing. If you are a Black man who's listening, you would first go to www.breuxcapital.com. That's BREAUXCAPITAL.com. And then in the upper right hand corner, you would click Join the Family. You click Join the Family, you will be asked whether you want to join the shareholding tier or the non-shareholding tier, Bro 100 or Bro Emeritus. And then, of course, you will also have the opportunity to fill out a brief questionnaire just to get some key data points early on so that we'll know exactly how we can serve you best. And then once you fill out that application, you'll check your email rather, and you'll set some time on the calendar and you'll see our membership agreement. You'll have the opportunity to go over the membership agreement, and then we can discuss it on the time that you pick for the calendar, or you can sign it prior. And then once we have that call, we can onboard you as a member to BREAUX Capital. So it's really a 1, 2, 3 of fill out the application, check your email, set the time.
And it's just that simple. I appreciate that, because I want people to seriously consider themselves in light of what's going on. And if we're talking about empowerment, if we're talking about Juneteenth, and if we're talking about freedoms, and if we're talking about a particular community, it starts with an investment in your mental change. It starts with an investment in yourself, an investment in your family and your future. And I'm glad that you guys have an entity, again, and an insight that counteracts some of the systemic and historical ills that we face in this country, and is really shining a light and offering an opportunity and a potential for individuals from an underserved community, for individuals who have been underserved economically, socially, and emotionally, to become not only a part of this family, but a contributor and a self-sustaining member for generations to come. I really appreciate you guys being on the show. I'm just going to at this minute say, I'll give you an opportunity for a brief last minute statement that you'd like to share with our audience. And I'll start with Derrius first. Any lasting call to actions, lasting statements, or information you want our listeners to know?
With this being a historic day, an historic Juneteenth, a Juneteenth that will certainly be remembered for decades at minimum, I reflect I reflect on the statement that was offered up to me and the encouragement that was offered up to me by one of our most inspiring elders, Harry Belafonte, when he told me as I was in the crowd that I was the dream that he and Dr. King marched for. That's a statement that I truly do take to heart. I took it to heart then in 2012, and I still hold it with me to this day, and I continue to operate within that fervor. And I do believe that although he was talking to me in that moment, I believe that he was also talking to our entire generation. It wasn't just a Derrius thing in that moment, but the opportunity that we, as what I'll describe as just the millennial generation, or we'll just say the younger generation, that we have today to connect with anybody across the globe instantly, to influence people across the globe instantly via the internet, to build a solution such as BREAUX Capital that can instantly connect and start changing the mindsets and changing the way people leverage capital instantly. This was not possible in 1980. This was not possible in 1970. Not in this same way. The ethos was possible, but the technical capacity of it was not. And so I just encourage, particularly any of the younger folks who are listening, that we are the dream that our ancestors marched for, that they died for. Um, we are better because of the sacrifices that they made for us, and let us not never forget that, and let us move forward and knowing that they're expecting us to do the same thing for the next generation beyond us. And for all of the elders listening, I just give a thank you.
Very well. Thank you. Ross.
Certainly. As Derrius mentioned, this is Juneteenth in 2020, and of course in 1619 to 2019 was the 400-year mark, and this is the dawn of a new era as we see shifts and changes and new norms form around us. I want to challenge the young black men and the young black men who are listening, as well as the young black men who will be in the lives of these listeners, is that BREAUX Capital is changing the game because we are playing by a different set of rules, right? And I'll give you an example just very quickly, to where understanding that we've been taught, don't do business, don't mix friends and family in business, right? Whereas the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Bush family, the Kennedy family, right, the Morgan family, all of these families will laugh at you if you tell them that you shouldn't mix family and business, right? How are you to build intergenerational wealth and build dynasties if we're not doing business with friends and family? So encourage those listeners to check out BREAUX Capital, because we are changing the game in a very real way. As Derrius mentioned, what our ancestors were really fighting for, and we've gotten the confirmation from a few Black Panthers in Chicago that we are the next level of that movement. And so with that being said, just certainly thank everyone for listening, and thank you, Dr. Kawanda, for allowing us to speak with you on this historic day.
No, absolutely. It has absolutely been necessary. You have been listening to Let's Chew the Gum, the podcast where we talk about everything from A to Z. And today we've started right at the B with BREAUX Capital. This is a very enterprising solution to some of the financial and social ills that are faced by particular communities, the African American community across America, the Afro descent community around the world. And we're talking solutions here. We're going to make sure we have the link and the information to access BREAUX Capital in the headings or in the description of this show. We thank you for listening. Remember, reach out to us, letschewthegum@gmail.com. If you have questions for our guests, I'll be sure to forward them. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or have topic ideas for the show, please do that as well. This is Let's Chew the Gum, and remember, we always have
Something for your mind. Something for your mind.
Lace my gal.
Something for your mind.
무엇인가 정신을 집어넣으세요. 어떤 것 필요합니까?
Something for your
정신을 집어넣으세요.
mind.